Betrayed by a trusted comrade and slain without mercy, Subaru's life came to an abrupt end. Instead of eternal rest, he awakened 2 decades later, reborn inside the frail body of a penniless young man living in the future. What burned deeper than the humiliation of weakness was the truth he soon uncovered. The man who had betrayed and murdered him was now celebrated across the nation as a legendary hero, carrying memories and knowledge of the tower no one else possessed. Subaru resolved to climb it once again. This time he would shock the world with power it had long forgotten, and he would reclaim what was stolen from him. Revenge was inevitable, but countless dangers still lay ahead. On the 8th floor of the tower, an endless frozen wasteland stretched beneath raging snowstorms. Through the blinding white, a vast army of knights advanced with discipline, cutting a path across the ice. At their front stood a blonde-haired man who suddenly lifted his hand, forcing the entire formation to halt at once. The army had gathered once more to confront the guardian of the 8th floor. Their commander was Itsuki, leader of the Blue Zone Guild, and the tower's 6th-ranked warrior. Itsuki reminded his forces not to grow careless simply because multiple guilds were involved. Failure here would end any hope of reaching the 9th floor, and complacency would cost them everything. As the storm intensified, a new presence appeared through the swirling snow. A group of elite fighters emerged, led by a man whose overwhelming aura and striking blue eyes immediately drew attention. This was Subaru Narukami, the masked master of the Blue Eyes Guild, and the tower's top-ranked individual, his face concealed behind a mask adorned with gold. Itsuki greeted Subaru upon his arrival. Although Subaru acknowledged his late appearance, it became clear that he had, in fact, arrived before anyone else. Subaru took note of the Murum Alliance's involvement this time, prompting Itsuki to explain that Subaru would take command of the offensive, while implying that the Alliance's true goal was simply to collect leftover spoils. Subaru paid no attention to the remark, and instead presented Itsuki with a legendary artifact known as Archangel's Pool. The item possessed an extraordinary ability, instantly restoring half of a user's stamina once exhaustion reached its peak. Itsuki was visibly shaken by the gesture. Subaru made it clear through his actions that this raid had to succeed regardless of cost. The artifact was offered as a safeguard, meant to be used only in dire circumstances. Itsuki then suggested that Subaru might return to the Blue Land once the battle ended, and that the item could be given back then. The weight of the moment left Itsuki visibly shaken. Subaru placed a firm hand on Itsuki's shoulder, making it clear that if Itsuki chose not to return, the artifact was his to keep. Before the moment could settle, an overwhelming pressure swept across the frozen plains. The enemy had arrived far sooner than anticipated. Through the raging storm, the colossal guardian of the 8th floor emerged, its immense body dominating the battlefield. Itsuki immediately ordered the troops to ready themselves for combat. The monster revealed itself as a sea dragon hydra, a horrifying beast with multiple heads crackling with lightning. Subaru stared at the creature with clear contempt as black and golden energy gathered around his body. A system message appeared, indicating lightning energy surging through his form. As Subaru prepared himself, the Hydra began charging a devastating attack from all its mouths at once. Itsuki urgently warned everyone to brace for a breath attack and take cover. Subaru, however, advanced without hesitation, drawing his blade and pressing forward alone. Itsuki watched in disbelief, uncertain of Subaru's intentions. In the next instant, Subaru unleashed a blindingly fast sword strike. The slash tore through the air and collided head-on with the dragon's attack, triggering a massive explosion of energy. The breath attack was completely erased, and the resulting shockwave carved a deep scar across the battlefield. Forced to shield himself from the impact, Itsuki took cover behind Subaru, wearing a faint smile as he reflected on how Subaru's methods had never changed. Behind them, Subaru's companions stared in awe at the outcome. One of the witches praised the results of their relentless training, while another fighter complained about missing the chance to strike first. A young woman questioned Subaru about the item he had handed Itsuki earlier, receiving only a vague response that she would learn the truth later. Subaru then turned to his team, confirming their readiness and declaring that the time had come to slay the dragon. Weapons were raised, resolve hardened, and the assault on the 8th floor began in earnest, a floor infamous for its hellish difficulty. Watching silently from the rear, Itsuki formed a thin, mocking smile, privately ridiculing their display of camaraderie. Shortly after, Itsuki received confirmation that his troops were positioned exactly as planned. He commended his captain and gave the signal to advance. His masked aide responded instantly, Wishing him success, Itsuki's followers moved with unnatural speed, while a healer wielding a staff stood protectively before him. The battlefield erupted into chaos as warriors clashed violently with the Hydra, whose roars shook the frozen plains. A swift female fighter dashed forward, urging her allies to hold nothing back. She sliced through the beast with ease, treating the exchange like a casual stroll. Nearby, an ice mage muttered complaints about the crushing pressure and tension dominating the fight. Amid the frenzy, a warrior enveloped in red energy charged ahead, challenging his comrades to see who could deal the most damage. He landed a devastating blow directly against the beast. Toshiya accepted the challenge without hesitation, adding a wager that the loser would pay for dinner. He lunged forward at blinding speed, carving through the dragon's flesh and severing one of its heads in a single strike. As the head fell, he warned Shino of its descent. Shino calmly prepared her magic, urging him to continue his assault. She summoned an enormous pink magical barrier, effortlessly blocking the falling head and confidently fulfilling her role as the group's shield. At that exact moment, Itsuki appeared silently behind her. He addressed her coldly, questioning whether her defenses could withstand his attack as well. Shino froze in shock. Without any pause, Itsuki drove his blade through her back, piercing straight through her chest. He dismissed her and the others as arrogant, claiming that overconfidence had always been their greatest flaw. Subaru turned just in time, calling out in horror, unable to comprehend what he was witnessing. Shino collapsed lifelessly at Itsuki's feet, her body soaked in blood. Standing over her corpse, Itsuki looked toward Subaru with a deranged smile, urging him not to avert his gaze. Subaru remained frozen, struggling to understand the reason behind Itsuki's betrayal, while the Sea Dragon Hydra continued its relentless assault toward him. Subaru's thoughts drifted back to the moment when the mysterious system messages first appeared. A colossal announcement had emerged across the void of space, declaring that certain individuals had been chosen by the tower. The message ordered them to begin climbing and prepare for an approaching beginning whose meaning was unclear. At that time, no one could determine whether the tower's call was a divine blessing or a merciless trial. Even now, its true nature remained an unsolved mystery. Yet its authority was absolute. No one had ever been able to resist its command. Driven by that irresistible force, people from countless dimensions, Earth, Merm, and many unknown worlds, continued to ascend the tower day after day. Each arrival carried their own goals, burdens, and destinies, all bound by the same cruel structure. Everyone shared the same ambition, reaching the summit that no one had ever conquered. However, reality proved far more brutal than hope. That memory ended in carnage, with Subaru standing alone amid pools of blood, surrounded by the lifeless bodies of his fallen comrades. His breathing came in short, ragged bursts as he surveyed the battlefield after slaying the Hydra. The red dragon, once believed to be invincible, rage surged through him as he blamed his comrades for failing to retreat when ordered. Regret followed immediately, knowing their deaths could have been avoided if they had listened. His body finally gave in, and he sank down before the dragon's massive corpse. The impossible feat had been achieved at last, yet victory felt hollow, as his eyes lingered on the scattered bodies around him. Bitterness consumed his heart. They had died without permission, and that truth was unbearable. System warnings suddenly flooded his vision. A poisoning status prevented any natural recovery. While the fatigue index had reached a critical threshold, Subaru understood the implications clearly. If the fatigue meter reached its limit, death would be unavoidable. As he contemplated the consequences and the system's cold declaration of inevitable death at full exhaustion, a fierce light ignited in his eyes, anger intertwined with unyielding resolve. At that moment, Itsuki approached with chilling calm. Subaru turned toward him in disbelief, struggling to comprehend what was unfolding. The reality of betrayal struck deeply, and Subaru demanded an explanation. Itsuki revealed that this moment had been 10 years in the making, insisting that Subaru alone was capable of understanding the necessity of such an outcome. Drawing closer, Itsuki revealed his twisted truth. This was the only path that allowed him to surpass Subaru. He admitted that Subaru's attention had been deliberately manipulated, and that the Blue Eyes Guild had been exploited as a distraction. Their presence would have stood in his way otherwise. Years of suppressed resentment erupted as Itsuki revealed the psychological torment he had endured under Subaru's shadow. In his warped reasoning, the world itself held greater value than friendship. Stepping back, he displayed feigned sorrow, declaring that the end had arrived and that the outcome was unavoidable. He then revealed the Archangel's pool, mocking the earlier agreement, and confirming with his allies that the Blue Eyes Guild would vanish entirely with Subaru's death. As he turned away, Itsuki took comfort in the belief that Subaru would live on as a hero in historical records, even if Subaru himself would never be able to confirm it. Despite blood filling his mouth, Subaru responded with a bitter, knowing smile. He recognized that Itsuki had only ever heard what suited him, fully aware that his life could no longer be saved. Subaru still refused to surrender quietly. He chose resistance over resignation and activated his remaining abilities. Itsuki froze in shock as Subaru rose once again, now holding the legendary Aless fan, an artifact capable of generating devastating winds. The fan still contained usable charges, and Subaru's glowing eye revealed his intent to use every remaining one to overturn the situation. He recalled the 4 surviving members of his guild behind him and unleashed a massive gust of wind, hurling them far from the battlefield. The force sent them flying to safety, ensuring their survival at the cost of his own strength. Itsuki realized Subaru's intention too late and reacted with panic. He ordered his soldiers to pursue the fleeing survivors and prevent any escape. As the Merm fighters moved to carry out the command, Subaru stepped forward, positioning himself like an unbreakable wall. Lightning gathered in his hand, forcing the soldiers to halt and confront him instead. The fatigue index climbed to 95%. Thunder roared overhead as the system announced restrictions on the Lightning Lord's skill duration. A massive pillar of golden lightning descended from the sky, transforming the battlefield into an electric inferno. From a distance, Itsuki watched with tension and a strained smile, acknowledging Subaru's stubborn refusal to fall. As fatigue reached 96%, Subaru charged forward once more. Surrounded by a terrifying aura, he wondered what kind of reward Itsuki had promised these soldiers to drive them into combat against a monster in this state. Standing before the enemy ranks, battered and bleeding, Subaru made it clear that advancing any further would cost them their lives. From that moment onward, no one would leave the battlefield without his consent. The soldiers realized the fight had become a matter of survival. With no retreat possible, they charged at him with everything they had. Subaru countered with exceptional skill, blocking incoming blades with his spear despite his failing body. Under normal circumstances, these opponents would not have posed a serious threat, but the looming possibility of Itsuki's interference remained his greatest concern. Still, Subaru felt a measure of relief knowing his comrades had escaped far enough. The fatigue index reached 97%. Time was running out. Subaru could not afford to prolong the battle. At 98%, pain crushed his body as he continued fighting relentlessly. Then a powerful strike staggered him, opening an opportunity for the soldiers to swarm. Blades descended from every direction, and blood sprayed across the battlefield. Convinced they had achieved the impossible, the soldiers erupted in celebration, believing Subaru Narukami had finally fallen. Their triumph was short-lived. Golden light flared in Subaru's eyes as his presence surged once more. Lightning erupted violently from his body, electrocuting the surrounding soldiers and hurling them away like lifeless dolls. Bodies crashed to the ground as Subaru collapsed to his knees. Completely exhausted, the remaining soldiers fled in terror, whispering that he was a monster who refused to die. From afar, Itsuki observed the scene with a cold smile, mocking the notion that Subaru's era would end so easily. At that moment, the fatigue index reached 99%. A red system warning appeared, declaring death inevitable upon reaching full exhaustion. Subaru gathered the last remnants of his strength and focused on Itsuki. More than anyone, Itsuki should have known how this would end. With a final surge of resolve, Subaru hurled his last spear. Wrapped in raging lightning, it tore through the air at supernatural speed. Itsuki clutched the Archangel's pool, confident in his survival, until the spear struck the jewel directly and shattered it. His final safeguard was destroyed. As Subaru's consciousness faded, clarity filled his mind. Even without witnessing Itsuki's death, the final strike had landed true. In the darkness that followed, Subaru wondered about his fate, questioning whether he would remain trapped in endless void. Then sensation returned. A foul stench assaulted his senses, accompanied by strange noises. Opening his eyes, Subaru found himself inside a metal trash bin in a filthy alley. Confusion overwhelmed him as a blue status screen appeared before his eyes, displaying an unfamiliar name, Subaru Haas, Level 1. Shock rooted him in place. Fragments of memory surfaced, Young men mocked him for being an earthling with weak specifications. Looking down on him with disdain, they ridiculed his condition and reminded him to strive to become even half the man the legendary Subaru Narukami had been 20 years ago. A voice echoed in his mind, confirming that Subaru Narukami had died 2 decades earlier. Looking at his reflection, Subaru realized the horrifying truth. This body was not his own. Denial and disbelief consumed him as he wondered if he was trapped in a nightmare. Panic took hold, and he leapt out of the garbage container, collapsing onto the ground, nearby. A tablet device caught his attention. Recognizing it as a player kit, he activated it to understand the world around him. His first search was for the Blue Eyes Guild. The results spoke of Blue Zone as its successor, highlighting its current weakness despite claiming to inherit Subaru Narukami's will. As he scrolled through the news, his gaze stopped on a statement by Guildmaster Itsuki, promising victory in an upcoming tournament. Subaru dismissed the claim instantly until he saw the attached photo. Itsuki had aged and now wore an eye patch. The realization struck hard. The traitor had survived. Memories surged of a night long ago, sitting atop a building with Itsuki, when the latter admitted his desire to leave the Blue Eyes Guild. Subaru had been stunned, especially when Itsuki asked him to explain it to the others. Despite considering Itsuki a close friend, Subaru had been told he would understand the reason later. Back then, Itsuki had promised to remain Subaru's shadow. The irony burned deeply. That same shadow later founded a guild named Blue Zone, a name they once joked about. Subaru returned to the present with bitter amusement. Even after 20 years, Itsuki remained stalled on the 9th floor, having achieved nothing truly meaningful. As Subaru walked through the streets, still browsing the news, his search halted at an image of a massive structure labeled the Subaru Narukami Memorial Hall. Stunned, he went there immediately. The building was far more luxurious and grand than he had imagined. Inside, a massive image of himself dominated the hall. Bitterness welled within him as he wondered why he was being remembered this way. Portraits and statues filled the space, all glorifying his image. He listened to lavish praise describing him as a role model, the hero of the Blue Eyes Guild, and the man closest to conquering the tower. The hall had been built to immortalize his memory and that of his fallen comrades. Rage ignited within him as a recorded speech from Itsuki played during the hall's opening ceremony. Dressed in formal attire and wearing a mask of dignity, Itsuki declared that Subaru and the Blue Eyes Guild no longer existed, proclaiming Blue Zone as their sole successor. Subaru trembled with fury. Itsuki had not only killed him, but had also exploited his legacy. The recording continued, emphasizing that Subaru would never return. Subaru stepped closer to the projected image, his hatred crystallizing into resolve. That false memory would be erased, and this time, Subaru would live long enough to rewrite it from the beginning. The Goblin King emerged at last, radiating a terrifying presence. Its fury burned intensely, stirred by the countless sacrifices made throughout the previous 49 stages. The pressure it released filled the arena, making its rage unmistakable. Huga continued shouting in desperation, convinced that surrender was the only option left. To him, challenging the Goblin King at this stage was nothing but madness. No matter how refined a player's technique might be, the overwhelming difference in raw physical attributes between a human and such a monster could not be overcome. Subaru understood this reality perfectly. His current parameters were insufficient to deal meaningful damage to the monster's hardened body through conventional means. Even so, retreat never crossed his mind. Instead, he loosened his grip, allowing his sword to fall freely to the ground. Huga was driven nearly insane by the sight. Watching Subaru discard his only weapon made it seem as though the young man had completely lost his sanity. At that moment, the Goblin King lunged forward with crushing force, intent on ending the battle in a single blow. Yet Subaru had noticed something unusual in the arena long before this confrontation began. He had been waiting for the perfect moment to exploit it. The Goblin King suddenly halted mid-motion. Its charge interrupted as a sharp pain surged through its leg. A thin needle had pierced deep into its flesh. Subaru was now kneeling on the ground, his hand filled with slender, razor-sharp needles. His expression carried calm confidence, almost mocking as he prepared for what came next. He had no intention of overpowering the monster directly. Instead, he committed to a calculated gamble, one that relied on precision rather than brute force. A faint blue glow radiated from Subaru's gaze as he began his assault. The needles shot forward at lightning speed, each throw perfectly controlled. They struck the Goblin King's eyes and face with flawless accuracy. A thunderous scream of pain erupted from the monster, as its vision was stolen in an instant. Blinded and enraged, the Goblin King lashed out wildly. Its massive axe slammed into the ground again and again, shattering stone with every missed strike. Subaru moved effortlessly through the chaos, weaving between attacks with graceful precision, never once allowing himself to be touched. He landed lightly and observed his opponent with focused calm. His mind revisited old lessons, memories of training centered around rotational force and its role in throwing power. He recalled being corrected for poor technique and being taught that any object, no matter how small, could become a deadly weapon if its center of gravity was properly understood. Applying those teachings flawlessly, Subaru struck again and again. Each needle found a vital point, embedding itself exactly where it would cause the greatest damage. The accuracy was absolute, as though every strike landed at the exact center of an invisible target. The Goblin King staggered violently. Blood poured from its neck, its massive body riddled with needles. Subaru stood firm, composed, and confident. The principles guiding his actions were clear in his mind. Power increased with rotational force, and precision vanished the moment hesitation appeared. He acknowledged silently that these techniques were not his alone. Without the training he had once received, executing them at this level would have been impossible. Huga watched the scene unfold in stunned disbelief. Only now did he realize that the goblin corpses and the poison needles scattered across the arena had never disappeared because the test had not officially ended. Subaru had noticed this overlooked mechanic and used it deliberately, what Huga had always considered an unchangeable rule. Subaru had turned into an advantage. It became clear that Subaru had never relied solely on swordsmanship. He had collected weapons from the battlefield itself, targeting weak points, with throwing techniques that demanded both insight and mastery. Sweat streamed down Huga's face as he struggled to find words adequate to describe what he was witnessing. Calling Subaru a genius no longer felt sufficient. As the Goblin King drew its final breath, its enormous body collapsed with a thunderous crash, signaling the end of the battle. Subaru calmly walked forward and retrieved his fallen sword. Standing before the lifeless giant, he showed no hatred or triumph, only quiet finality before ending it completely. System messages appeared, announcing the defeat of the boss and confirming the successful completion of the 50th stage of the tutorial program. A feat never achieved before. Subaru wiped the sweat from his brow, inwardly criticizing the cruelty of placing such a monster within what was supposedly a training phase. New notifications followed immediately. His level increased, credits were awarded, and achievement points accumulated rapidly. Most importantly, the tutorial shop unlocked. Accessible only at this stage, Subaru was momentarily stunned by the number displayed before him. He possessed 2,425 achievement points, a sum he had never seen before, even in his previous life. As he browsed the shop, he noticed that most ordinary tools cost between 5 and 200 points, leaving him with a vast surplus. One item, however, seized his attention: an unknown demonic sword, classified as rare and priced at 1,000 points. Forged by a failed magic blacksmith, it increased cutting power at the cost of consuming the user's health and soul. The weapon was tempting, but Subaru quickly remembered that his lightning ability already drained his vitality, making the sword an extremely dangerous option. His attention shifted to another item, the Holy Sword Miranda. Priced at 1,400 points, it reduced fatigue and extended combat endurance. Subaru weighed the choices carefully. What he needed most was survival, not raw destruction, yet neither option felt completely right. As he scrolled further, he realized the list extended beyond what he initially thought. At the very bottom, he discovered an F-rank skill named Wedge of Greed, priced at 1,400 points. Its effect was simple yet absurdly powerful, suppressing the side effects of skills and equipment used by the user. Shock washed over Subaru. He had never encountered a skill like this before. Almost instantly, he understood its potential. It could negate the drawbacks of the demonic sword, and possibly even reduce the negative effects of his own lightning ability. Without hesitation, Subaru made his decision. He purchased both Wedge of Greed and the unknown demonic sword, spending the majority of his points. When the sword materialized and he tested it, the synergy was exactly as he had predicted. The skill and weapon complemented each other perfectly, far surpassing the effectiveness of relying on a single ability. Huga interrupted the moment, acknowledging the compatibility of Subaru's choices while admitting that, as a supervisor, he could not fully understand the logic behind them. He questioned the value of selecting such a seemingly useless skill. Subaru responded with visible boredom, behaving as though explaining every detail was beneath him. Huga bristled at the attitude. Subaru immediately shifted his demeanor, feigning fear and offering an exaggerated apology. Huga calmed down slightly, attributing the behavior to exhaustion from the exam and deciding to overlook it just this once. As Subaru looked at the supervisor more closely, memories surfaced. The arrogant child from the past had grown into the man standing before him. He recalled a time when a young Huga had approached one of Subaru's companions, declaring admiration and asking for an autograph. Subaru, lacking a formal signature, had written only his name instead. Huga had then launched into a lecture about declining morals in the younger generation, while Subaru had quietly reflected on how times and hairlines inevitably changed. The memory ended as Huga erupted in anger in the present, accusing Subaru of relying on shallow knowledge gathered from the internet. Subaru refused to answer further, citing exam confidentiality, and turned to leave. Huga shouted threats after him, vowing to personally teach him manners. Attempting to recover the situation, Huga offered Subaru a chance to join the Chivalry Guild. The rejection came instantly and without hesitation. The supervisor was left stunned by such a direct refusal. A system window appeared, asking Subaru whether he wished to proceed to the second floor. Huga tried desperately to stop him, calling out as he chased after him, but Subaru ignored everything and vanished from sight, leaving the old supervisor behind in utter confusion. Huga stood alone in the arena, overwhelmed by disappointment and frustration at the young man's behavior. Meanwhile, Subaru arrived on the second floor. His feet touched the land of the City of Beginnings. The area buzzed with life. Vendors shouted their wares, offering strange goods such as deep-sea rags from Rune Terra and exotic dried meats. Subaru moved through the crowd, observing items ranging from merm silk to earth leather jackets. As the noise and movement surrounded him, the reality of his return fully settled in. This was a rare opportunity, one that few ever received, a true second chance. Having lived through this path once before, Subaru resolved to handle everything differently this time. His thoughts drifted to his former comrades, memories of quiet nights spent around a fire. The weight of their brutal end hardened his resolve. Revenge was no longer a vague desire. It was a promise he intended to fulfill. With purpose in his stride, Subaru headed toward the training building. Upon arrival, he requested a private room, preparing to test his newly acquired skills and equipment. The old employee glanced at Subaru with clear boredom and casually asked which floor he had come from. Subaru answered briefly, stating that he had just arrived from below. The training building was a place people visited frequently, so the employee showed little interest. With a lazy gesture, he pointed down the corridor toward the first room, explaining through his tone that it was the most suitable option. That room only contained a straw dummy, appropriate for someone at Subaru's level. However, Subaru surprised him by requesting access to the fifth room instead. The employee stared at him in disbelief, momentarily wondering if he had misheard. He tried to dissuade Subaru honestly, explaining that booking such a room would only waste money and suggesting again that the first room was more appropriate. Subaru calmly thanked him for the concern and firmly insisted on reserving the fifth room for 30 minutes. After paying 50 credits, Subaru walked down the corridor. The employee shouted after him, warning that there would be no refunds if he left early, and muttering that the young man was pretending to be a hero beyond his limits. The room system was structured so that difficulty increased with each number. The first room contained nothing more than training dummies, while the third already held massive rocks meant to test strength. Naturally, onlookers cast disdainful looks at a beginner walking confidently toward the most difficult rooms. Subaru entered room number 5 and shut the iron door behind him. Darkness swallowed the space as he prepared himself. He drew the unknown demonic sword, which immediately began to glow red. The system recognized him as its user, and in an instant, violent crimson energy erupted from the blade. The sword began consuming Subaru's health and magic without mercy, forcibly amplifying his physical abilities. The surge was brutal and overwhelming. Almost immediately, the Wedge of Greed skill at level 1 activated, attempting to resist the sword's backlash while restoring a small portion of lost health. However, the resistance proved incomplete. Subaru felt fatigue creeping into his body as the sword continued draining his life. He quickly realized that the skill's first level was insufficient. The sword devoured his vitality more aggressively, but in return, his combat power multiplied rapidly. Subaru clenched his teeth, recognizing that he had reached the maximum threshold his body could currently endure. Still, the outcome matched his expectations. Without hesitation, he spent 10,000 credits to upgrade the Wedge of Greed's skill on the spot. The skill advanced to level 2, with the next upgrade requiring 20,000 credits. This time, the improved skill managed to suppress the sword's recoil more effectively. Although the blade continued consuming his health, the resulting increase in power was terrifying. Subaru understood immediately that the experiment had succeeded. Raising the glowing sword high, he leapt forward, ready to test its destructive capabilities. Outside the room, the employee struggled to stay awake in his quiet office. Suddenly, the door to room number 5 burst open, and Subaru stepped out. The employee froze, his body trembling as doubt filled his mind. He wondered whether he was dreaming or hallucinating. Subaru had only been inside for 10 minutes. Approaching the room cautiously, the employee knocked and then opened the door slowly. The sight before him robbed him of speech. The room was utterly destroyed. The walls were fractured, the floor was ruined, and the massive rock meant for training had been sliced cleanly in half with horrifying precision. He could only stare in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what had happened inside. Elsewhere, Subaru awoke in his hotel room. Stretching as stiffness lingered in his body, he made his way to the lobby and sat down with a cup of coffee, reflecting on his experiment with the cursed sword. If the weapon had been ordinary, the outcome would have been disastrous. Instead, the physical burden had been reduced significantly, and he had successfully extracted its power. He reviewed his status window. At level 10, his physical attributes were still modest. Under normal circumstances, he would not have been able to even lift such a weapon, let alone wield it. The synergy between the Wedge of Greed skill and the demonic sword had been flawless, confirming that his strategy was sound. With quiet confidence, Subaru considered the potential of combining this setup with his lightning element. However, reality quickly dampened his optimism when he checked his remaining balance. Barely 50 credits remained, while upgrading the skill further required 20,000. A bitter realization followed. This body had lived in poverty its entire life. Subaru sighed heavily, surprised at himself for worrying about money management. He comforted himself with the thought that surviving justified such concerns. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a loud greeting echoing through the lobby. He turned to see a young man wearing cat ears enthusiastically filming a live stream. The streamer spoke excitedly about his experiences on the second floor and his journey as a newcomer. A donation notification for 1,000 credits flashed on the screen, fueling even more enthusiasm. In his excitement, the streamer spilled coffee on himself, but exaggerated his reaction for the camera. Thanking the donor dramatically, Subaru watched in disbelief, momentarily questioning the sanity of the scene. Curious, he checked his tablet and learned about the rise of live streaming, discovering that nearly 1 in 3 players now used it to earn points. He finally understood that the spectacle he had just witnessed was a donation-driven broadcast. Suddenly, a familiar voice called his name. Subaru turned to see a well-dressed man approaching him, clad in luxurious clothing. The man remarked on the coincidence of meeting again and asked whether Subaru had climbed up as well. As he spoke, Subaru felt a strange sensation ripple through his body. Not annoyance, but a sharp, instinctive thrill. It was a warning born from memory. Subaru realized immediately that the relationship between the body's original owner and this man had been deeply unpleasant. The man spoke down to him, displeased at being ignored, as if Subaru's silence offended his sense of superiority. As Subaru met his gaze, the discomfort deepened. Memories surfaced rapidly. Subaru answered tersely that he had just arrived, while the man, Isaac, displayed mocking satisfaction. He clearly had not expected someone as weak as Subaru to survive the tutorial, having assumed he would be killed by goblins early on. The memories of Subaru Haas flooded back in full. He remembered standing before Isaac, trembling with fear, being interrogated coldly. Isaac's harsh scolding echoed in his mind, dismissing any attempt at explanation. The humiliation continued as Isaac insulted him relentlessly, calling his name irritating and accusing him of incompetence, stupidity, and attention-seeking behavior. Subaru remembered crying, desperately trying to justify himself by explaining that the credits he had been given were insufficient. Isaac had not listened. Instead, he struck him violently, knocking him to the ground and ordering him into silence, branding him worthless. He mocked the garbage container Subaru had hidden in, declaring it his new home and threatening severe consequences if he ever left it. The bitterness of those memories lingered. Subaru questioned what kind of fool endured such abuse without resistance. The reason became clear. Fear and helplessness had trapped the original owner into submission. Back in the present, Isaac boasted arrogantly about reaching the 20th stage and surpassing his father's record. He bragged about gaining the admiration of Supervisor Huga and acquiring a rare B-rank skill, claiming it was the highest reward possible in the tutorial. He demanded a drink without courtesy. Subaru responded with cold indifference, announcing his intention to leave. Isaac attempted to stop him, ordering him to buy cheap coffee. Subaru's bored sigh ignited Isaac's anger. The change in Subaru's behavior was unmistakable. Isaac stared at him suspiciously, disturbed by the sudden loss of obedience, mocking the possibility that Subaru's soul had changed. Subaru answered calmly that he had no credits left and advised Isaac to buy his own drink before turning away. Isaac ordered him to sit down in a threatening manner. Subaru refused. Internally, he acknowledged that now was not the time to avenge the original body's suffering, but he firmly warned Isaac not to obstruct his path. Suddenly, Isaac grabbed Subaru's arm tightly, threatening him and reminding him of the fate awaiting disobedient trash. Subaru met his eyes with cold intensity and warned him to let go for his own sake. Isaac tightened his grip around Subaru's arm, issuing a sharp warning against arrogance, while deliberately using Subaru's first name with clear contempt. Subaru immediately understood that provoking a scene in such a crowded place would only work against him. Without warning, Isaac suddenly burst into loud laughter, brushing the tension aside, as if everything had been nothing more than a joke meant to frighten Subaru. Just like in the past, he released Subaru's arm and continued ridiculing him, dismissing him as nothing more than a timid, insignificant weakling. Isaac went on to mockingly speculate that Subaru must have barely survived the tutorial by sheer luck and desperation. Subaru remained silent, acutely aware that his body was reacting instinctively, with fear ingrained deep into muscle memory. Isaac stepped closer, his disdain unmistakable, implying that any thought of resistance would be foolish. He reminded Subaru of his father's influence, and the ease with which someone like him could be erased without consequence. After delivering his final warning, Isaac walked away laughing condescendingly, cautioning his companion to be careful. Subaru stood in place, his anger simmering dangerously beneath the surface. The phrase used moments earlier echoed bitterly in his mind, dripping with irony and resentment. The scene shifted to explain the tower's growth system. Advancement followed two primary paths. The first involved clearing tower trials within virtual space, where players earned power and rewards under relatively safe conditions. Failure in these trials resulted only in the loss of credits and progress, without the risk of permanent death. The second method was real-world hunting. Players ventured outside safe zones or entered dangerous dungeons to fight living monsters. Growth through hunting was significantly faster, but the risk was absolute. Death in these zones was final, with monsters devouring fallen players mercilessly. Because of this, most players avoided hunting altogether, choosing safety over speed. The entrance to a dark and ominous orc nest loomed nearby. Though dangerous, it represented the fastest path to power. Subaru sat exhausted before the corpse of a massive monster, reflecting on the harsh truth he had just proven. Safety brought slow progress, while danger accelerated growth. Staring at the fallen creature, he smiled faintly, accepting this reality. He then checked his tablet and was caught off guard by a live broadcast. Someone was impersonating him. The imposter wore a mask identical to his own and greeted an audience exceeding 80,000 followers while announcing a challenge on the third floor. Disgust washed over Subaru as he realized how many people were exploiting his name and image. Suddenly, a new mission appeared within the stream, mocking his identity and offering a reward of 20,000 credits. The imposter accepted instantly. Overwhelmed with excitement, more absurd missions followed, each offering massive financial rewards for increasingly ridiculous challenges. Subaru stared at the screen in disbelief as the imposter thanked supporters enthusiastically and promised to fulfill every request. The comparison was painful. While the imposter earned wealth effortlessly through streaming, Subaru was risking his life fighting monsters. He glanced at his own balance, which barely exceeded 50 credits, and sighed bitterly at the disparity. In the end, he accepted reality. He had no choice but to keep fighting, Drawing his blood-stained sword, Subaru prepared himself once more. A group of enraged orcs emerged, charging toward him. He rushed forward without hesitation. At that moment, the dungeon's area boss appeared, the orc general radiating an overwhelming aura. Subaru faced the boss and its guards calmly, internally mocking the absence of poisoned needles this time, and acknowledging that he had something far more effective prepared. Activating the Wedge of Greed skill, Subaru sacrificed his own vitality to amplify his power, his expression twisting into a manic smile. With explosive force, he leapt high and crushed one orc's head beneath his foot, instantly recovering part of his health and mental energy. Moving at supernatural speed, he tore through enemy ranks, vaulted over the orc general, and delivered a single decisive strike. The boss fell instantly. A notification appeared, announcing successful dungeon completion. Subaru stood amid the remains, victorious. Later, he retrieved his old mask and examined it carefully. He realized that circumstances had left him no choice but to wear it once again. Standing before a mirror, he put the mask on and reflected on everything he had learned about the streaming world. If he was going to enter that arena, he would do it his own way and with absolute resolve. He declared himself the true original. He immediately began a live broadcast titled with his own name, triggering chaos at the headquarters of Sutin Entertainment Company. A female employee watching the stream reacted with visible anger, only to scream in shock moments later. Her colleague rushed to her side, demanding an explanation as she pointed at the screen in disbelief. She cursed uncontrollably, unable to accept that someone had completed a near-impossible mission that only 5 people had ever succeeded in. Her colleague tried to calm her down, reminding her of the self-censorship system that penalized foul language, and asked about the streamer's identity. The employee, Hatutsuka, grumbled about the countless imposters disguising themselves, prompting her colleague to question whether the streaming industry had truly declined. She reminded him sharply that this field was their livelihood, and that even players risking their lives in the tower often found it dull. Still shaken, she revealed the streamer's name, leaving her colleague unsure whether this was merely another imposter or something new. She explained that with the original Subaru missing, the strongest imitation was the closest thing to the real deal. In the broadcasting office, her colleague questioned why she had abandoned climbing the tower to remain in such a job. She answered simply that boredom had driven her choice. Emotions flared as she reminded him that he too had given up. If she had the time, she would rather search for genuine talent than tolerate this chaos. Her colleague admitted calmly that he had withdrawn due to lack of skill. Hatutsuka countered that his true motivation had been admiration for Subaru Narukami, and that losing enthusiasm after his idol vanished was inevitable. Suddenly, she screamed again and pointed at the screen. Her colleague rushed over, expecting yet another oddity, only to see a new live stream from the second floor, featuring someone wearing Subaru's outfit. He criticized her for watching a stream with 0 viewers, calling it beneath a talent scout. Hatutsuka, however, stared in awe. Whenever she saw that mask, she felt an uncontrollable sense of hope. Without hesitation, she donated 1,000 credits to the stream, causing her colleague to collapse dramatically and beg for forgiveness. Meanwhile, Subaru continued walking through the starter dungeon on the second floor. He noted that while the difficulty was manageable, the tension was suffocating. Despite being alone, he sensed an eerie pressure, as if unseen eyes were watching him. Viewer comments began to appear, asking about his progress. Subaru acknowledged that this was his first challenge. Another viewer warned him about the dangers of streaming as a beginner and navigating unknown paths. Subaru proceeded carefully. Suddenly, a one-eyed bat lunged from the shadows. Subaru reacted instantly, countering and eliminating it with a single strike. A notification confirmed the monster's defeat and awarded an achievement point. Subaru addressed the viewers with icy calm, questioning whether there was any issue. Subaru continued moving through the shadow-filled dungeon as the number of viewer comments steadily increased. Some viewers expressed admiration for his sharp reflexes, impressed by how quickly he responded to danger. Others urged caution, advising him not to push his luck and to wait for a team instead of advancing alone. Subaru read the messages with detached calm. Though he acknowledged the advice, he dismissed it internally, knowing that cooperation was not an option for him. He remained firm in his decision to challenge the dungeon solo. This confidence sparked ridicule from the audience. Many mocked him openly, predicting his inevitable failure and accusing him of riding on the fame of Narukami Subaru to gather views. Subaru paid no attention to the sarcasm. His focus shifted entirely to the presence ahead as a new enemy emerged from the darkness. A mud nymph burst violently from the ground, launching itself toward him. Subaru evaded the ambush with precise footwork and struck back instantly, delivering a lethal blow with his demonic sword. A notification appeared confirming the monster's defeat and awarding 2 points. Subaru took this as an opportunity to push himself further, deciding to see how far his limits could be tested. Viewers reacted with confusion and amazement, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Moments later, shrill cries echoed throughout the dungeon. A group of bats and mud nymphs poured in from multiple directions. Subaru surged forward like a raging storm, his sword glowing crimson as it carved through the monsters in rapid succession. His speed and destructive force left viewers stunned, unable to reconcile what they were seeing with the idea that this was a beginner on the second floor. Notifications flooded the screen as monster after monster fell, points accumulating rapidly. Subaru stood amidst the chaos, sword in hand, silently proving that he was far more than a mere imitator. In the thick darkness of the cave, Subaru began explaining how enemies could be detected by sound alone. Even without sight, his explanation was met with waves of mockery. Viewers accused him of fabricating knowledge and pretending to be experienced despite clearly being a newcomer. Subaru reached up and touched his mask, reflecting that if they knew the truth behind it, they might finally understand his mindset. Despite the continued ridicule and accusations of impersonation, Subaru pressed forward with unwavering resolve. He acknowledged internally that the points he had earned so far were still insufficient. His goal was clear: to accumulate as many achievement points as possible before leaving the dungeon. Viewers continued watching with skepticism. Some sarcastically remarked that a real man would charge ahead without commentary, while others questioned whether Subaru had conducted any research before entering such a dangerous area. Suddenly, Subaru stopped moving. He lifted his head slowly, revealing the horrifying reality above him. The entire cave ceiling was densely packed with one-eyed bats. In unison, countless glowing red eyes opened, flooding the cavern with an oppressive presence. Anticipation surged among the viewers, many convinced that Subaru had reached the end of his run and was about to be forced into another retry. At that moment, a new mission notification appeared from a viewer offering a mere 100 credits in exchange for eliminating every bat in the cave. Most viewers immediately labeled the request as a cruel joke or a malicious trap. Contrary to expectations, Subaru accepted the challenge calmly, acknowledging the reward without hesitation. The scene shifted to the broadcasting company. Hatutsuka's colleague sat at his desk, slamming his hand down in frustration over his failure to reach the 6th floor. Realizing his outburst, he quickly apologized for disturbing her. Hatutsuka, however, remained fixated on her device, her expression unusually tense. She noticed something abnormal on the screen, prompting her colleague to ask what had caught her attention. When she muttered that something was wrong, he immediately panicked, misunderstanding her reaction and attempting to justify himself, claiming the amount involved wasn't significant and promising not to gamble again. Hatutsuka barely acknowledged him, her eyes widening in disbelief as she continued staring at the display. She clarified that she wasn't referring to his behavior at all. Pointing at the screen, she revealed the name displayed there, Narukami Subaru. Her colleague froze, unable to understand why she was still watching that stream. His confusion turned into genuine horror as he comprehended what was unfolding. On the screen, Subaru moved like a natural disaster among the bats. His sword traced red arcs through the air, bodies falling faster than viewers could count. The comment section exploded as people struggled to believe that this massacre was occurring on a beginner-level floor. Sympathy even began shifting toward the bats themselves. No one could keep track of how many monsters were falling with each strike. As he fought, Subaru recalled words spoken long ago by Shigur, who had once praised him for his unwavering breathing and gaze. Even while changing attack directions mid-swing, Shigur had explained that while it appeared Subaru defeated enemies in a single strike, he was actually predicting their movement patterns and acting ahead of time. Subaru remembered responding that he hadn't consciously thought about it, a reply that had left Shigur baffled. That memory ended with Shigur grumbling that it was better not to possess such instincts at all. Returning to the present, Subaru continued tearing through the swarm. He applied the same principles to combat that he once used in communication, maintaining focus, conveying intent immediately, and avoiding unnecessary targeting when dealing with groups. He later explained that one-eyed bats always attacked by thrusting their heads forward. The larger their numbers, the greater the opening they created. Subaru exploited this flaw, charging directly into their collective momentum. When the battle ended, Subaru stood surrounded by remains, blood dripping steadily from his blade. Viewers objected loudly, claiming his explanation clarified nothing. One viewer, who had previously dismissed him as a beginner, demanded an apology. Subaru remained composed. Another comment sarcastically compared his explanation to stating that walking requires putting one foot in front of the other. Subaru reflected inwardly that communication was far more difficult than combat. The viewer who issued the challenge reminded him not to forget the reward. Subaru abruptly realized he had no idea how to accept it. He began tapping his tablet hesitantly, confusing viewers who thought the stream had frozen. Subaru stared at the screen in complete uncertainty, unsure how to proceed. The comment section erupted with laughter at his lack of technical skill. With guidance from Love Money, who explained where to press, Subaru finally managed to claim the reward. 100 credits were added to his balance. He expressed his gratitude and announced that the next challenge would be his final one. As he advanced confidently toward the dungeon's exit, his balance rose to 150 credits, and his achievement points reached 118. Back at the broadcasting company, Hatutsuka suddenly screamed, startling her colleague. She pointed at the screen in disbelief, asking if he had ever witnessed anything like this. He attempted to calm her, reminding her that it was only a second-floor stream. Hatutsuka grew emotional, insisting that her reaction was justified. Her colleague apologized nervously. Overcome with excitement, Hatutsuka began speculating wildly, imagining that this could be the real Subaru Narukami returning from Earth. She theorized about destiny and reincarnation, referencing novels she had read. Her colleague watched her with concern, noting that she always lost composure whenever Subaru was involved. Dizzy with excitement, Hatutsuka asked Seong-hyun to pinch her to confirm she wasn't dreaming. He refused and asked seriously whether she intended to recruit this streamer. Hatutsuka reacted with overwhelming enthusiasm, confirming her intent, even if he wasn't the real Subaru. His ability as a solo streamer was undeniably rare. Seong-hyun attempted to discourage her, warning about the department head's inevitable anger. Hatutsuka dismissed his concerns, reminding him of his recent gambling and ignoring him entirely. She returned her attention to Subaru's stream, telling him to wait and see that she would ultimately be right. Subaru finally reached the dungeon's end, where an enormous gate emerged before him. Passing through it, he found himself face to face with a massive wolf-like figure seated calmly in the chamber. Greg, the wolf warrior, guardian of the second floor, radiated overwhelming presence. Viewers commented on the crushing pressure they felt just from watching, with one admitting to failing against him 8 times. A new mission appeared, requiring Subaru to earn the wolf warrior's recognition to proceed. Subaru explained that Greg was not a monster meant to be slain, but a gatekeeper who tested a challenger's strength and judged their worth. Another mission notification appeared from Safe Origin, offering 3,000 credits in exchange for defeating the wolf warrior. Subaru was visibly stunned. Viewers reacted strongly, condemning the donor for making an impossible request and assuming Subaru had no intention of fighting. Greg, the wolf warrior and second-floor guardian, stood poised before Subaru, ready for the confrontation. Back within the test arena, the system formally declared the commencement of the lightning trial. Almost immediately, Subaru sensed a surge of imminent danger. A sudden warning rang out as a stranger rushed forward, forcefully shoving him aside just moments before catastrophe struck. A deafening explosion followed, shaking the ground violently as something massive crashed down. Shattered stone and debris scattered in all directions, and a dense cloud of dust engulfed the area. As the dust settled, a colossal white giant was revealed, its enormous body flexing with raw power. The stranger who had intervened berated Subaru for his lack of awareness, clearly frustrated that their effort to save him had nearly been wasted. At that moment, a new system directive appeared, instructing Subaru to defeat a fragment of the giant. Still kneeling on the ground, Subaru stared up in disbelief. Confusion filled him as he questioned why such a monster had appeared here. The giant growled deeply, its presence overwhelming. Viewers watching the stream were equally baffled, unable to understand why a creature from the circle of giants had emerged during a lightning test. Subaru's tension intensified as he recognized the truth. This was a boss-class entity, one that should only appear in the latter half of the trial. As the giant prepared to strike, Subaru considered the possibility that his defeat of the wolf warrior Greg had altered the test's progression, forcing a far more dangerous challenge upon him. The fragment of the giant swung its massive club downward, pulverizing the ground and sending shockwaves through the arena. Chunks of rock flew through the air as destruction spread outward. Subaru reacted instantly, moving lightly to evade the strike. Despite the creature's sheer size, he noted that its physical structure was inferior to that of the wolf warrior. He silently expressed gratitude for having prior knowledge of this weakness. The stranger who had saved him shouted again, angrily urging Subaru to flee while he still could. Ignoring the warning, Subaru resolved to end the battle swiftly before any further complications arose. Drawing his sword, Subaru activated the unknown Demon Blade's ability. His health began to drain, as the weapon converted his vitality into raw combat power. To restrain the backlash, he activated the second level of the Wedge of Greed skill, suppressing the sword's violent recoil. As the giant charged, Subaru evaded a crushing stomp that shattered the ground beneath it. Instead of retreating, he surged forward, sprinting up the giant's extended arm with lightning-fast speed. The giant failed to comprehend what was happening until Subaru had already passed behind it midair. Landing firmly on the creature's shoulder, Subaru drove his blade deep into its flesh. Blood sprayed violently as the giant roared in agony. Subaru remained cold and focused, irritated by the creature's noise. With a decisive motion, he delivered a final strike. Blood erupted from the giant's neck as its massive body collapsed lifelessly to the ground. A system message appeared, confirming the defeat of the giant fragment and the successful clearance of the fourth stage. The livestream erupted in shock as viewers struggled to understand how Subaru had suddenly advanced to the fourth stage. Notifications flooded in, announcing his level increase and significant boosts to strength, agility, health, and magical power. He also received 4,000 achievement points at once, along with 2 rare items, the Heart of the Giant and Lightning Bolt armor. Comments exploded with disbelief, marveling at both the extraordinary rewards and the unprecedented feat of clearing stages 1 through 4 consecutively after defeating the wolf warrior. The stranger who had saved Subaru earlier returned, panting heavily. Identified by viewers as Falcon, he appeared shaken, staring at Subaru in disbelief. Subaru responded calmly, maintaining a heroic posture and implying that the truth was obvious at a glance. Though his response was vague, it only intensified the curiosity and mockery of viewers. The scene transitioned to a quiet village, where Subaru entered an inn and sat down on a bed to rest. Stream viewers immediately demanded to see the items he had acquired. Subaru agreed, sharing their curiosity. He first revealed the Heart of the Giant, a rare ring that increased health and improved recovery. He openly admired its effectiveness. Next, he displayed the Lightning Bolt armor, a rare defensive item that increased defense, carried lightning attributes, and possessed an active skill that nullified negative status effects once per day. When Subaru equipped it, his appearance became strikingly majestic. Moments later, new missions appeared from multiple viewers, beginning with Narukami Koa, who offered 5,000 credits in exchange for witnessing Subaru learn a lightning skill. Similar offers followed from others, including I Am Bald, Mission Villain, and Safe Origin. Each promised thousands of credits solely to see lightning power in action. Subaru thanked everyone sincerely and promised that they would witness lightning soon. As he studied the screen, unease crept in. He began to wonder why so many were fixated on lightning specifically. A realization formed that the original Subaru Narukami might have held far greater influence than he had initially assumed. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Subaru allowed the visitor inside, as comments noted someone approaching. Falcon entered, accompanied by a dignified knight clad in gleaming armor. Falcon introduced the man respectfully as Lord Pellis, commander of the village knights, apologizing for the delayed arrival. Falcon explained that giant attacks had become increasingly frequent, forcing the knights into constant vigilance. Villagers had been instructed to remain indoors unless absolutely necessary. As Pellis discussed defensive measures with his aide, Falcon expressed surprise at encountering a traveler during such a dangerous period. Pellis offered thanks on behalf of the villagers, acknowledging Subaru's role in protecting the area during their absence. Subaru responded modestly. As he studied Pellis, Subaru recognized him as a stalwart figure destined to stand as the village's shield. Pellis revealed that reconnaissance had successfully identified the giant leader's location. With unwavering resolve, he announced their intention to risk everything to corner the leader within its den. Swallowing his pride, Pellis bowed and requested Subaru's assistance in saving the village. While Subaru observed silently, the live stream filled with cryptic warnings. Viewers addressed Pellis directly, urging caution and pleading for future events not to be spoiled. Subaru recalled memories from the original narrative and realized a grim truth. Pellis was fated to die in the next stage. Despite this knowledge, Subaru asked Pellis to raise his head. Pity and resolve mixed in his gaze as he agreed to help. Relief and renewed confidence appeared on Pellis's face as he expressed gratitude. At that moment, a system announcement declared the start of the 5th stage, titled Survival. The small force marched toward the rugged mountains. Subaru walked among them while checking his tablet. Noticing the rapid surge of viewer comments as the audience grew, he realized meaningful interaction was becoming nearly impossible. Suddenly, Pellis halted the group. Raising his hand in warning, he pointed ahead, indicating the enemy's location. There, leaning against a hill, the giant leader slept deeply, its tattooed body massive and bearded. Pellis proposed, drawing the leader's attention, while Subaru attacked from behind. Subaru interrupted, sensing something amiss in the surrounding atmosphere. His eyes widened as he grasped the horrifying truth. The ground split apart as additional giants emerged, encircling their leader. Whether coincidence or design, it was a trap. Giants poured in from every direction, pale faces twisted into chilling smiles as they surrounded the knights completely. Pellis froze in shock. One giant seized a knight and crushed him effortlessly, screams echoing through the air. Panic spread instantly as blood splattered across the battlefield. Another giant devoured a knight whole, its cold gaze and grin-inducing terror. Chaos overtook the formation. Orders to retreat were shouted toward the mountain's base, but fear ruled the moment, discipline shattered, and the knights scattered in all directions as the ambush closed in. The giants descended in a frenzy, tearing through the knights with overwhelming brutality. One after another, soldiers were seized and ripped apart in sweeping, merciless attacks. A knight was slammed to the ground in the grip of a giant as his younger brother screamed in horror. Begging him to stop, fellow soldiers restrained the boy desperately, trying to keep him from charging into certain death. His cries echoed across the battlefield as his older brother was crushed beneath the giant's feet, reducing the field into a living nightmare of blood, shattered bodies, and severed limbs. Amid the chaos, Commander Pellis roared orders at the top of his lungs, commanding an immediate retreat. He stressed that this was a direct military order, not a plea nor a suggestion. He shouted reminders of the families waiting back home, of the village that still needed protecting, insisting that this was not the end. They would survive, regroup, and return another day. Fear finally overcame hesitation. The soldiers fled toward the forest in a desperate bid to live. Pellis turned sharply to Falcon, shouting instructions and entrusting him with command of the remaining forces, ordering him to lead the withdrawal safely. Then he faced Subaru, who still stood unmoving amid the carnage. Pellis urged him to run as well, pleading with him to survive so that the order could be rebuilt, and the giants faced again in the future. Before Pellis could continue, Subaru cut him off coldly. As Subaru drew his sword, the blade ignited with a deep crimson glow. He stated calmly that such words belonged to him instead. He began walking steadily toward the approaching giants, directly against the flow of retreat. Pellis stood frozen in shock, unable to understand what this stranger intended to do. Subaru halted briefly and explained with chilling seriousness that he could not fight freely at full strength while Pellis remained. He gave him two choices: leave immediately, or stay and die together in this place. Pellis rejected the idea at first, shouting that he would never abandon someone who stood to fight for them. Subaru silenced him instantly, ordering him not to force him to repeat himself. At last, Pellis relented. His voice trembled as he agreed to gather the remaining men. He asked Subaru to endure until then. As he ran, Pellis shouted that he owed Subaru his life, begging him to stay alive no matter what. Subaru was left alone. Before him stood the advancing giants, their pale faces twisted into monstrous smiles, their towering bodies radiating death. Subaru charged forward, gripping his black sword, calmly declaring that their opponent now stood before them. He moved like lightning. Subaru darted between the giant's legs, delivering precise, lethal strikes with ruthless efficiency. Two giants fell in quick succession, system notifications flashing to announce their defeat and the acquisition of achievement points. As he fought, Subaru admitted inwardly that despite knowing this was a test, the sensation of being the one left behind to sacrifice himself was something he still hadn't grown accustomed to. In the distance, Pellis slowed and glanced back. Sweat poured down his face as anxiety and regret twisted his expression while he watched Subaru swallowed by a sea of giants. From every direction, massive bodies closed in, Stream comments erupted, labeling the scene as suicide, pointing out that sheer survival alone was impossible at this stage. But Subaru's thoughts were elsewhere. He thought of Pellis, of the fate awaiting him in the original story, and realized that with his current strength, there might still be a way to save everyone and rewrite that ending. Two giants attacked simultaneously. Subaru braced himself, then sliced cleanly through one giant's body in a single motion. A notification confirmed the kill and rewarded points. Warnings appeared repeatedly, as the cursed demon's sword drained his stamina at an alarming rate. In exchange, every combat statistic surged upward. Subaru became a whirlwind of steel and motion, carving through giants one after another. Individually, they were manageable. The true danger lay in how long his body could endure the sword's power before collapsing. Recognizing this, Subaru changed tactics. He leapt high into the air, using the giants themselves as platforms. Bounding from body to body, he descended upon them from above, beheading them with terrifying precision. He pierced through their formation at extreme speed, leaving fallen giants behind him. One crushing kick shattered a giant's skull outright. Viewers flooded the stream with astonished comments, recognizing this aerial combat style as Narukami Subaru's specialty. Throughout the battle, the level 2 Wedge of Greed skill worked relentlessly to suppress the sword's backlash. Subaru felt his health and mental strength partially recover, acknowledging internally that powerful equipment truly made a difference. Yet the giants were endless. Subaru identified his true objective. He had to defeat the boss quickly, before his body reached its absolute limit. Then the giant leader appeared. The boss emerged with a terrifying grin, savage light blazing in its eyes as it swung its massive weapon, intent on crushing everything in its path. Compared to its immense size, Subaru looked insignificantly small, yet he charged forward without hesitation. In that critical moment, Subaru understood one absolute truth. If he failed to end this fight with a single decisive blow, he would be the one to die. He gathered every remaining ounce of strength and rushed toward the boss. Activating the lightning bolt, armor's special shield skill, thunder roared violently across the battlefield. A massive bolt of golden lightning descended from the sky, slamming into the ground with explosive force and illuminating the darkened heavens. The electrical surge paralyzed the surrounding giants instantly. Seizing the opening, Subaru launched himself from above, crashing down toward the reeling boss. The giant roared in agony and rage, cursing humanity as Subaru drove his cursed sword deep into its neck. He continued the assault mercilessly, even as the blade drained his life force at a terrifying pace. At last, the giant leader collapsed. A system message announced the defeat of the giant seed and the successful clearing of the 5th survival stage, praising the feat as an extraordinary achievement. Further notifications followed rapidly. Subaru's level increased twice. His strength, agility, vitality, and magic points all rose as rewards for the overwhelming victory. The livestream exploded in disbelief. Viewers questioned whether anyone had ever defeated this boss before. The answer was unanimous: no. This stage had never been intended to be cleared through combat, meaning Subaru had shattered its design entirely. Exhausted, Subaru looked down at his battered body. He lamented his current weakness, having hoped to end the fight with a single elegant strike like those in comics. Reality, however, was far harsher. As the clouds cleared, the battlefield atmosphere shifted. The remaining giants clutched their heads in confusion after the death of their leader. Subaru landed heavily on the ground, gasping for breath. He realized the Wedge of Greed had failed to fully negate the cursed sword's consequences. Then came the horrifying truth. Despite clearing the stage, the giants did not disappear. The rules dictated that monsters would remain until the test's full duration ended. Subaru felt danger surge again as the giants regained their senses and slowly turned their gazes back toward him. The loophole he had exploited earlier had now become a fatal trap. His power was completely exhausted. The giants closed in once more, their twisted smiles returning as they prepared to crush him while he stood helpless. Just as one giant raised its arm to deliver the killing blow, a devastating bolt of black and gold lightning tore down from the heavens. The lightning struck Subaru directly. A colossal explosion of energy erupted across the battlefield. The scene shifted far away from the battlefield to a quiet, secluded place deep within a forest. A wooden cabin stood peacefully beneath the sunlight. Outside, a woman sat calmly, enjoying the warmth and fresh air. Shiger stepped out of the cabin and asked why she was sitting outside. She replied softly that the weather was beautiful and the air was clear. adding with a calm smile that savoring moments like this was the only thing they could do now. Shiger followed her gaze toward the distant horizon. His expression grew serious as he agreed, noting that their remaining time was nearly gone. At most, they had only 1 year left. His tone hardened as he concluded that it was finally time to bring everything to an end. He then noticed that Reina was distracted, her attention fixed on her device. He commented that she always behaved this way whenever things became serious. Curious, he asked what had captured her focus. Without hesitation, she turned the screen toward him. Displayed was an image of a masked individual. Reina told him that the person went by the name Narukami Subaru. Shiger's eyes widened instantly, and he shouted the name in shock. Reina cut him off coldly, stating that this was obviously not the Subaru they knew. She explained while showing the livestream that this was merely a streamer using the same name. Currently taking the second-floor test, Shiger stared at the screen in stunned silence as familiar combat movements unfolded before his eyes. Reina spoke firmly, emphasizing that if Subaru had truly survived that past situation, Kazuki would have been erased from the tower long ago. Confused, Shiger asked what she meant. Reina met his gaze with a sad yet sharp expression, insisting that Subaru was dead and that it was time for him to accept that truth. Shiger attempted to end the conversation and leave, clearly exhausted by the topic, but Reina called out to him, scolding him for hiding in the shadow of that boy for so long. Shiger responded coldly, questioning why she was watching the stream at all if she truly believed that. Reina replied that she was simply killing time, nothing more. Suddenly, her eyes widened in shock as she stared at the screen. Shiger immediately noticed her reaction and turned to look as well. His breath caught as he muttered in disbelief at what he saw. Back on the battlefield, a colossal explosion of golden lightning erupted. Thunder roared violently as the ground shattered, blasting giants away in every direction. When the dust cleared, Subaru stood at the center of the devastation, surrounded by a crackling electrical aura. A system notification appeared, announcing his acquisition of the Thunder skill. Subaru stood with glowing red eyes as achievement points poured in, 2,000 in total, along with options to either continue the test or transfer. Followers in the chat erupted in amazement. Subaru stared in disbelief, realizing that this location was never supposed to grant this skill. Comments flooded in, pointing out that defeating the giant boss must have been the hidden condition. Subaru read the details of the rank A+ Thunder skill, noting that it consumed both health and magic. As the remaining giants began regrouping, Subaru silently thanked fate for allowing him to survive. For now, completed quest messages and massive donations flooded in, reaching thousands of credits. Subaru expressed his gratitude to everyone. When his balance surpassed 20,000 credits, he realized he owed them a proper show of appreciation. He prepared to fight again. The remaining giants roared furiously and charged toward him. Subaru decided to show them something special. He spent 20,000 credits instantly to upgrade the Wedge of Greed skill. The system announced that Wedge of Greed had reached level 3, now capable of resisting the violent backlash of thunder. Although he wanted to release the energy through his entire body, Subaru chose caution. He focused all the lightning into his right hand alone. Satisfied with the control, he launched himself forward at lightning speed toward the charging giants. The unknown demon sword began radiating destructive lightning energy. Subaru raised it high, declaring that it was time to let loose, just a little like in the old days. He brought the blade down with overwhelming force. A massive rift of red energy and lightning tore through the battlefield, ripping through the enemy ranks. When the light faded, Subaru stood panting heavily, sweat pouring down his body. He cursed his miscalculation, realizing he should have saved strength for the return journey. Giant corpses lay scattered everywhere. His energy was completely drained. His body swayed, and he drove his sword into the ground to keep himself upright. At that moment, a group of armored knights came running toward him. Commander Pellis spotted Subaru collapsing and screamed in shock, rushing forward while calling him their savior. Subaru's strength finally gave out, and his body fell forward. Through blurred vision, he saw Pellis sprinting toward him with panic etched across his face. Subaru muttered weakly to himself, calling Pellis a fool for really coming back all this way. Just before he lost consciousness, Pellis's hand reached out and caught him, preventing him from hitting the ground. Elsewhere, Hatsuka stared intensely at her phone resting on the table. Behind her, the manager and her colleague Seong-hun watched in silence, confusion thick in the air. The manager asked gravely whether all this trouble was worth it. Seong-hun replied that he didn't understand women's hearts and shouldn't be asked such things. Hatsuka buried her face in her hands, overwhelmed by despair and embarrassment. Her face flushed bright red as she replayed the message she had sent, worrying it sounded too cold and formal. She blamed herself for not adding decorations or cute phrases, fearing it might come across as a dry business message. Seong-hun asked sarcastically if she was in love with the person. Hatsuka exploded in denial, insisting it was strictly business. But she admitted the context was different. Suddenly, she screamed in excitement, revealing her true feelings. She confessed that she had been an obsessive fan long before becoming his potential manager and couldn't help feeling nervous. The manager tried to calm her down, but then remembered something critical. The Thunder skill. Previously, it had belonged only to the legendary Subaru Narukami. Hatsuka confirmed enthusiastically that the title was no longer singular. Seong-hun expressed relief, joking that their salaries were safe thanks to this discovery. The manager stroked his chin thoughtfully, acknowledging that it made sense why no one had ever learned the skill before, and concluding that this individual deserved close monitoring. Suddenly, Hatsuka's phone beeped. She screamed with pure joy, announcing that Subaru Narukami had read their email. Her happiness lasted only a second. Her expression froze completely when she realized he had read it, but hadn't replied. She stiffened as though turned to stone, while her colleagues looked on with pity at her devastated state. Elsewhere, inside a high-end studio outfitted with the latest streaming technology, Hawkeye prepared to begin his broadcast, known across the streaming world as the definitive authority on genius-level combat analysis. Hawkeye had built his reputation on razor-sharp insight and encyclopedic knowledge. His precise breakdowns had crushed competitors and secured him an untouchable position in the field. Before going live, he reviewed footage of numerous rising players. He analyzed Kurakatwa Ammon, who had recently entered the blue zone, describing him as a dark horse climbing the tower at an absurd pace. He flipped through profiles of other prominent figures, noting that Kazuki, one of the original members of the Blue Eyes Guild, had been receiving considerable attention lately. But today's focus was different. Today's analysis centered on the cross-generational legend, Narukami Subaru. Hawkeye stated firmly that regardless of public opinion, the lightning skill belonged to this man alone. The live stream went live. Hawkeye greeted his viewers enthusiastically, announcing that today's broadcast would focus on the most controversial player currently shaking the tower. As he began reviewing the recorded combat footage, he cautioned his audience not to rush to judgment. Seconds later, he froze. Sweat slowly rolled down his face as he stared at the screen, muttering in disbelief. He pointed out that this player had only just acquired the skill, yet was already using it at a level that exceeded normal human limits. He explained in detail that Subaru exercised absolute precision, injecting exactly the necessary amount of energy into his sword. No excess, no waste. Every movement reflected perfect judgment and situational awareness. Hawkeye stated confidently that Subaru had not made a single mistake throughout the entire fight. His voice lowered as he wondered aloud where such a monster had come from, noting that less than half the chat truly understood the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Without hesitation, Hawkeye declared that this boy would become a major name in the tower, without question, and announced that he would personally keep watching him from now on. Just before ending the stream, Hawkeye paused. With a serious expression and eyes burning with intensity, he delivered his final remark. In terms of control alone, this new player may already surpass the original Narukami Subaru at his peak. Meanwhile, inside the tower's break room, Subaru woke abruptly on his bed, breathing heavily. System notifications appeared, announcing that the 6th stage was on standby and that his physical fatigue had been fully restored. Subaru chose to delay the attempt. Although his body had recovered, his mind was still deeply exhausted. He grabbed his device and thanked his followers, momentarily stunned to see the viewer count had reached 742. Wondering when it had climbed that high, he apologized and announced that he would take a one-day break, promising the next stream the day after tomorrow. The system confirmed that Narukami Subaru had ended the live stream. Subaru left the break room and entered the waiting area. While walking, he checked his phone and noticed an incoming message. It was from Hatsuka, from the management department at Sutin Entertainment. She thanked him for his time, encouraged him to check his messages, and explained that their company provided full support for streamers, guaranteeing the highest profit ratios in the industry. Subaru stared at the screen suspiciously, wondering if it was spam. The name Suiton Entertainment felt unfamiliar. The scene shifted to an outdoor cafe with a classic aesthetic. Subaru sat calmly, sipping coffee while researching the company on his phone. He quickly discovered that Suiton Entertainment was a massive multi-channel network specializing in streamer management, investing heavily in talent development. He paused, surprised by how much the world had changed. Companies now existed solely to support streamers. Reading further, he realized Suiton was one of the largest entertainment corporations in the field. Scrolling through comments, Subaru noticed discussions about Hawkeye's analysis of him. Some debated whether he had become Hawkeye's next obsession. Others argued over whether a newcomer could truly surpass the original Subaru in control. While skeptics accused Hawkeye of bias towards Suiton, Subaru realized Hawkeye worked closely with Suiton. He blushed faintly and smiled to himself, muttering that the analyst truly had a good eye. Outside the cafe, Isaac stood gripping his phone tightly. He read an excerpt from Hawkeye's analysis, specifically the claim that the new Subaru might surpass Narukami Subaru at his prime, in terms of control. Rage boiled inside him. He scoffed, calling Subaru a rookie who had barely reached the second floor. He cursed Hawkeye violently, swearing to gouge those eyes out himself once he cleared the stage. Isaac stormed into the cafe, shoving the door open and complaining about his terrible day. Then he saw Subaru. A crooked smile spread across his face. He muttered that the day must be cursed. Subaru appeared everywhere he went. Isaac deliberately walked past Subaru's table and slammed into it, knocking over the cup. Scalding coffee spilled across Subaru's clothes, making him jump back from the heat. Feigning innocence, Isaac apologized mockingly, then pretended to recognize Subaru with exaggerated surprise. Standing over him, he smirked and remarked how often they seemed to meet lately, adding that the second floor really was small. He offered to buy Subaru a new coffee, sarcastically suggesting that since Subaru was always broke, he should be grateful. Subaru ignored him and turned to leave. Isaac ordered him to stop. Subaru looked back with a cold, piercing gaze, one Isaac deeply disliked. Calmly, Subaru reminded him that he had warned him before, asking if he had lost his mind to try again. Furious, Isaac grabbed Subaru by the collar, snarling insults and threatening to crush him like in the old days, insisting that wiping that arrogant look off his face wouldn't be enough. Subaru apologized flatly, saying he didn't have time for such nonsense. Then he grabbed Isaac's wrist. With overwhelming force, Subaru squeezed. Isaac's expression shifted instantly from rage to shock and pain. He wondered in disbelief if Subaru had always been this strong. Subaru released him, stepping back calmly. He said coldly that this would count as payment for the coffee, thanked Isaac for the treat, and walked away. Isaac screamed after him in pure frustration as Subaru exited the cafe. Gritting his teeth, Isaac muttered furiously that he had only wanted to climb the tower quietly for once. He whispered two names with burning hatred, Narukami Subaru and Haas Subaru, acknowledging that both had pushed his anger beyond its limit. Meanwhile, Subaru glanced at his tablet and realized he had forgotten something. He took out his phone and replied to a message. Elsewhere, Hatsuka was relaxing in her bathtub, idly playing with a rubber duck. When her phone buzzed, she froze as she read Subaru's message, short, simple, and promising a meeting soon. A spark of excitement lit up her eyes.